The text message from my brother Daniel lit up my phone screen at 11:58 p.m. on December 30th. Don't come to New Year's Eve tomorrow. My fiancée is a corporate lawyer at Davis and Polk. She can't know about your situation. 20 minutes later, Mom called to confirm their decision. Harvey, we think it's best if you stay home this year. Jessica is very successful, and we don't want to embarrass Daniel. I stared at my modest studio apartment, surrounded by takeout containers and secondhand furniture, then replied simply, understood. What they didn't know was that in 48 hours, Jessica would walk into the biggest client meeting of her career and find me sitting at the head of the table as CEO of Secure Vault Financial, her firm's most valuable new account. Growing up as Daniel's younger brother meant living in a shadow that stretched across every family gathering, school event, and milestone moment. While Daniel excelled in high school sports and earned a business degree from Northwestern, I spent my teenage years tinkering with computer programs in our basement, dreaming of innovations that could change how people manage their money. Our parents celebrated Daniel's every achievement with elaborate dinners and photo sessions, while my coding victories earned polite nods and suggestions that I focus on something more practical. The pattern continued through college. Daniel landed internships at prestigious consulting firms, while I scraped together funds for my computer science degree at a state school. Family conversations revolved around Daniel's networking successes and career trajectory, while my entrepreneurial ideas were dismissed as unrealistic fantasies. When I dropped out senior year to launch my first startup, a peer-to-peer payment app called Quick Transfer, the disappointment in our parents' voices cut deeper than any direct criticism. For 18 months, I lived on ramen noodles and hope while building Quick Transfer in a shared warehouse space with 3 other broke developers. Daniel would visit occasionally, bringing care packages from Mom and lectures about practical career choices. He genuinely worried about me, which somehow made his condescension harder to bear than outright dismissal. The night we sold Quick Transfer to Payment Tech Corporation for $8 million, I sat alone in my empty apartment staring at the wire transfer confirmation on my laptop screen. Most people would have celebrated publicly, but I had learned something valuable about my family during those lean months. The few times I had mentioned potential investors or promising meetings, my parents' sudden interest felt hollow and transactional. They loved the idea of my success more than they had ever supported my struggle. So I made a decision that seemed crazy to everyone except me. I would let them think Quick Transfer had failed while I used the money to build something even bigger. Secure Vault Financial started in a small office in Chicago's financial district with just me and my Quick Transfer co-founder Marcus Chen. We developed blockchain-based security protocols for financial institutions, focusing on mid-tier banks and credit unions that larger firms ignored. While my family worried about my apparent continued failure, Secure Vault quietly acquired clients across the Midwest, each contract building our reputation and revenue. The hardest part was maintaining the illusion of struggle. I kept my old Honda Civic and studio apartment while Secure Vault grew from a 2-person operation to a 50-employee company valued at over $200 million. Family dinners became exercises in selective truth-telling, where I shared just enough real challenges to maintain their narrative of my failure while hiding the exponential growth happening behind the scenes. Daniel's engagement to Jessica Martinez last spring represented everything my family had always wanted in a daughter-in-law. She was beautiful, accomplished, and worked at one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. During their engagement party, I watched Jessica charm everyone with stories about representing Fortune 500 companies and rubbing shoulders with corporate executives. When someone mentioned my work in computers, Jessica smiled politely and changed the subject to something more impressive. That night, I went home and researched Davis and Polk's client list. They represented several companies that competed directly with Secure Vault's banking clients, but they had never worked in blockchain financial security. As Secure Vault prepared for our next growth phase, Marcus and I had discussed hiring top-tier legal representation for our upcoming initial public offering. Davis and Polk's expertise in financial law made them an obvious choice despite the personal complications. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jessica had spent months bragging to my family about her important corporate clients, never knowing that her firm was about to pitch their services to the brother she had helped them dismiss as a failure. When our company secretary Emily Rodriguez called to confirm the January 2nd meeting with Davis and Polk, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread that kept me awake for hours. New Year's Eve arrived with a text from Mom asking if I was doing okay by yourself. I spent the evening in Secure Vault's office reviewing quarterly reports that showed our revenue had increased by 400% over the past year. Our blockchain security protocols were revolutionizing how regional banks protected customer data, and 3 major financial institutions had approached us about acquisition deals that would make me worth more than Daniel could imagine. As midnight approached and fireworks lit up Chicago's skyline outside my office window, I thought about the family celebration happening 20 miles away. Daniel was probably making toasts about his bright future with Jessica, while my parents basked in their finally having a successful child through marriage. None of them knew that the biggest success story in our family history was sitting alone in a downtown office building, an empire they had never bothered to understand. The next morning brought a LinkedIn notification that made my stomach turn. Jessica had posted photos from the New Year's party, including a group shot of my entire family laughing and celebrating. Her caption read, "So grateful to be part of the Morrison family. Some people know how to show up for the important moments and others make excuses. Here's to surrounding ourselves with winners in 2024. The comments from family friends and Daniel's colleagues praised Jessica's positive attitude and made subtle references to family members who couldn't be bothered to attend. I closed LinkedIn and opened my calendar. In exactly 36 hours, Jessica Martinez would walk into conference room A at Davis and Polk, expecting to meet with some anonymous tech CEO about legal services for a growing financial company. She had no idea that her career's biggest opportunity was about to become the most awkward moment of her professional life. Jessica Martinez had built her reputation at Davis and Polk on 3 principles: meticulous preparation, ruthless ambition, and an unwavering belief that success meant associating only with other successful people. At 29, she was the youngest senior associate in the firm's corporate law division, a distinction she had earned through 80-hour work weeks and a talent for making partners feel indispensable. The Secure Vault financial account had landed on her desk 3 weeks earlier, and Jessica immediately recognized it as her ticket to partnership. The company's revenue projections and expansion plans suggested legal fees in the 7-figure range, exactly the kind of client relationship that transformed careers. She spent her Christmas vacation researching blockchain technology and financial regulations determined to impress whatever tech entrepreneur had built this promising company. What frustrated Jessica was the lack of personal information about Secure Vault's leadership team. The company maintained an unusually low public profile for a business of its size. CEO Harvey Morrison was listed in corporate filings, but had no social media presence and rarely appeared in trade publications. Jessica's Google searches revealed only basic biographical information: 28 years old, computer science background, 2 previous startup ventures. The sparse details suggested someone who either avoided publicity or had nothing impressive to publicize. During lunch with her colleague Amanda Walsh, Jessica expressed her puzzlement about Secure Vault's mysterious founder. "I've handled dozens of tech executives, and they all want to be the next Elon Musk. This Harvey Morrison character seems completely invisible. Either he's brilliantly strategic about privacy, or he's just another awkward programmer who got lucky." Amanda laughed while reviewing Jessica's preparation notes. "Maybe he's one of those Silicon Valley weirdos who thinks social media is beneath them. As long as his company can pay our bills, who cares if he's socially competent?" "Exactly," Jessica agreed. Daniel's family is so refreshing because they understand the importance of presenting yourself properly. His brother Harvey is the perfect example of what happens when you don't prioritize success and networking. The guy couldn't even show up for New Year's Eve because he's embarrassed about his situation. The conversation shifted to Jessica's engagement plans and her excitement about joining a family that shared her values about achievement and social standing. She had grown up in a middle-class household where her parents worked multiple jobs to afford her education, and she had no intention of ever returning to that level of financial uncertainty. Daniel represented stability, ambition, and a social circle that could accelerate her career indefinitely. On January 1st, Jessica spent 6 hours in her Lincoln Park apartment preparing for the Secure Vault meeting. She created detailed presentations covering intellectual property protection, regulatory compliance, and corporate governance structures for rapidly scaling financial technology companies. Her research into blockchain applications had revealed dozens of potential legal challenges that smaller firms would miss, giving Davis and Polk a significant competitive advantage. Thomas Davis, the senior partner overseeing the Secure Vault account, had personally requested that Jessica lead the presentation. At 62, Thomas had built his reputation representing Chicago's most successful entrepreneurs during their transition from startups to publicly traded corporations. His confidence in Jessica's abilities meant that landing Secure Vault could guarantee her partnership track within 2 years. This is exactly the type of forward-thinking client we need to attract, Thomas told Jessica during their final preparation meeting. Financial technology is reshaping entire industries, and Secure Vault appears positioned to benefit from every major trend. If we can establish ourselves as their primary legal counsel, this account alone could fund our expansion into cryptocurrency and digital banking law. Jessica nodded enthusiastically while privately calculating how much her partnership percentage would be worth if Secure Vault's projections proved accurate. She had seen enough startup presentations to recognize genuine growth potential, and Secure Vault's financial data suggested a company preparing for explosive expansion. The mysterious CEO might be socially awkward, but his business instincts were clearly exceptional. The morning of January 2nd arrived with freezing rain that turned Chicago's streets into sheets of ice. But Jessica arrived at Davis and Polk's downtown office 2 hours early to review her materials one final time. She had chosen her most expensive suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that conveyed both authority and approachability, paired with the pearl necklace Daniel had given her for Christmas. Her assistant Kevin Park had arranged the conference room with military precision leather portfolios. At each seat, fresh coffee and pastries and presentation materials organized for maximum visual impact. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of Lake Michigan, creating an atmosphere of success and sophistication that had impressed countless clients over the years. At 9:30, Thomas Davis arrived with the firm's other senior partners who would observe the presentation. Their presence underscored the importance of the Secure Vault account and Jessica's role in securing it. She felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that accompanied high-stakes meetings, the sensation that had driven her through law school and up the corporate ladder. Remember, Thomas advised quietly, these tech entrepreneurs can be unpredictable. Some are brilliant strategists, others are lucky programmers who stumbled into success. Stay flexible and focus on demonstrating our expertise rather than trying to impress them with legal jargon. Jessica smiled confidently. I've dealt with every type of CEO imaginable. Successful business leaders recognize competence when they see it, regardless of their background. By the end of this meeting, Secure Vault will understand that Davis and Polk is the only firm capable of handling their legal needs. At 9:55, Kevin announced that the Secure Vault team had arrived and was being escorted to the conference room. Jessica took a deep breath, straightened her jacket, and prepared to meet the mysterious Harvey Morrison, who had built such an impressive company while maintaining such a low profile. In 5 minutes, she would discover whether her instincts about social status and success had been catastrophically wrong. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Hope your big meeting goes well today, babe. Mom says you're presenting to some nobody tech CEO. At least it's not as embarrassing as my loser brother Harvey showing up somewhere important. Love you." Jessica smiled and slipped her phone into her briefcase, completely unaware that she was about to meet the very person her fiancé had just insulted. The conference room door opened at exactly 10 o'clock, and Jessica's confident smile froze on her face as Harvey Morrison walked in wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. For 3 seconds, that felt like an eternity. Neither of them moved or spoke, while the reality of the situation crashed over them like a glacier breaking apart. "Ms. Martinez," Harvey said calmly, his voice carrying none of the uncertainty she expected from Daniel's supposedly failed brother. "I understand you'll be presenting Davis and Polk's services to Secure Vault Financial today." Behind Harvey, 2 other executives entered the room, a sharp-eyed Asian man in an expensive charcoal suit and a poised Latina woman carrying a leather briefcase that screamed executive assistant. Jessica's brain struggled to process how Daniel's basement-dwelling brother had transformed into this composed CEO, surrounded by what were obviously successful professionals. "Mr. Morrison." Jessica managed to stammer, her voice betraying the shock she was desperately trying to hide. "I wasn't expecting, I didn't realize that your fiancé's family had been completely wrong about my situation." Harvey finished smoothly, taking his seat at the head of the conference table. With the natural authority of someone accustomed to running high-stakes meetings. "I imagine this creates some awkwardness for you professionally." Thomas Davis looked between them with growing confusion, clearly sensing undisclosed history but unsure how to address it. The other Davis and Polk partners exchanged glances while Jessica stood frozen beside her carefully prepared presentation materials, her confidence evaporating like steam. "Perhaps we should address any potential conflicts of interest before proceeding," suggested Marcus Chen Harvey's CFO, his tone professional but pointed. "Ms. Martinez, do you have any personal relationships that might compromise your ability to represent Secure Vault's interests objectively?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, while her mind raced through the implications of admitting her connection to Harvey. Confessing their family relationship would likely end her involvement in the biggest case of her career, but lying could destroy her reputation if the truth emerged later. Meanwhile, Harvey watched her internal struggle with an expression that revealed nothing about his own intentions. "I believe Ms. Martinez is engaged to my older brother Daniel," Harvey said finally, his tone as neutral as if he were reading stock prices. "This is the first time we've met in a professional context, though I understand there may have been some misconceptions about my career trajectory within the family." The words hit Jessica like physical blows. Harvey's casual revelation that he knew exactly how his family had discussed him, combined with his obvious success and authority in this boardroom, made her previous assumptions seem not just wrong, but maliciously ignorant. She had participated in excluding him from family gatherings based on the assumption that he was an embarrassment, never imagining that he might be the most successful person in the room. "Mr. Morrison." Thomas Davis interjected, his concern about the client relationship overriding everything else. "If there are personal complications that might affect our ability to serve Secure Vault effectively, we should discuss alternative arrangements. That depends entirely on Ms. Martinez's ability to maintain professional standards despite personal relationships." Harvey replied, his eyes never leaving Jessica's face. "I'm told she's quite accomplished in corporate law. I'd hate for family dynamics to interfere with her career opportunities." The subtle threat beneath Harvey's polite words was unmistakable. He was offering Jessica the chance to proceed professionally, but any hint that she couldn't separate business from personal matters would end her involvement immediately. Jessica realized she was completely at his mercy professionally and personally dependent on the goodwill of the man her family had treated as a failure. "I can absolutely maintain appropriate professional boundaries," Jessica said quickly, her voice stronger than she felt. "My personal relationships won't interfere with my representation of Secure Vault's interests." "Excellent," Harvey said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then perhaps we can proceed with your presentation. I'm particularly interested in your expertise with initial public offerings, since Secure Vault will be going public within the next 18 months. The casual mention of an IPO sent visible excitement through the Davis and Polk partners, who immediately understood the enormous legal fees such a project would generate. Jessica forced herself to focus on her prepared materials, while internally reeling from the revelation that Harvey's company was worth enough to justify a public stock offering. As she began her presentation about intellectual property protection for financial technology companies, Jessica's phone buzzed against her leg. Through the glass conference room walls, she could see it was Daniel calling, probably wanting to hear about her meeting with the Nobody Tech CEO he had mentioned in his text. The irony was so overwhelming that she nearly laughed out loud. "Ms. Martinez," Harvey interrupted gently, "your phone appears to be vibrating. Please feel free to take any urgent calls." The offer was clearly a test, and Jessica knew that answering Daniel's call would demonstrate exactly the kind of unprofessional behavior that Harvey expected from someone who had participated in his family's dismissive treatment. She declined the call and continued her presentation, acutely aware that every word was being evaluated, not just for legal expertise, but for evidence of her character and judgment. 20 minutes into her presentation about regulatory compliance for blockchain technologies, Jessica's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Harvey's mother, probably wanting to gush about how proud she was that Jessica had landed such an important client meeting. The timing was so perfectly awful that Jessica wondered if the universe was deliberately orchestrating her humiliation. "That's my fiancé's mother," Jessica said weakly, hoping Harvey might suggest postponing the call. "Please answer it," Harvey said with dangerous courtesy. "I'd hate for my mother to think you were ignoring her calls during such an important business meeting." Jessica's hands trembled as she accepted the call, putting it on speaker, since declining would look even more suspicious. Her mother-in-law's excited voice filled the conference room with enthusiasm that made Jessica's situation exponentially worse. "Jessica, darling, I'm so proud of you for landing that big technology client. Daniel told me you're meeting with some computer company CEO today. I know it's probably just some nerdy programmer, but it sounds like they have money, and that's what matters for your career." The silence in the conference room was deafening as Harvey's mother unknowingly insulted her own son in front of his business associates and potential legal counsel. Jessica watched Harvey's face remain perfectly composed while his mother continued her cheerful dismissal of his professional accomplishments. "I'm actually in the middle of the presentation now," Jessica managed to say desperately, trying to end the call. "Oh, how exciting. Well, don't let some awkward tech person intimidate you. You're much more accomplished than any of these startup people. Daniel and I are so grateful that you're finally bringing some real success into our family, not like Harvey's constant disappointments." Jessica ended the call and looked across the table at Harvey, whose expression had shifted from neutral professionalism to something much more dangerous. She had just witnessed him hear his own mother dismiss his achievements while praising the woman who had participated in his exclusion from family gatherings. The power dynamic in the room had shifted decisively, and Jessica knew her career was now entirely dependent on Harvey's mercy. The silence following Harvey's mother's call stretched across the conference room like spilled wine, staining everything it touched with uncomfortable awareness of the family dynamics, now exposed to Secure Vault's leadership team, and Davis and Polk's senior partners. Jessica watched Harvey's face maintain its professional mask while she desperately calculated how to salvage both her career and her relationship from this catastrophic collision of personal and professional worlds. Perhaps we should take a brief recess. Thomas Davis suggested, clearly recognizing that the meeting had veered into territory far beyond normal client presentations. This might be an appropriate time to address any potential conflicts of interest more thoroughly. That won't be necessary, Harvey replied smoothly, though Jessica detected steel beneath his polite tone. Family opinions about career choices are hardly relevant to Secure Vault's legal needs. Ms. Martinez, please continue with your analysis of our regulatory compliance requirements. The request was simultaneously professional and punitive, forcing Jessica to proceed with her presentation while processing the emotional whiplash of hearing her future mother-in-law unknowingly insult the very person she was trying to impress. Jessica's carefully rehearsed talking points about financial technology regulations felt hollow and mechanical, as she struggled to maintain focus under Harvey's unwavering gaze. Marcus Chen, Harvey's CFO, took detailed notes throughout Jessica's presentation, occasionally asking technical questions that revealed both his sophisticated understanding of legal issues and his awareness that Jessica was operating under extraordinary pressure. His questions were fair, but pointed clearly designed to evaluate whether personal complications would compromise her professional performance. Ms. Martinez. Marcus said during a discussion of securities law compliance, "What's your experience with companies that maintain low public profiles during rapid growth phases? Some executives prefer to build substantial businesses without attracting premature attention from competitors or media." The question was obviously directed at Jessica's earlier assumptions about Harvey's invisibility online, and she recognized it as another test of her ability to separate personal prejudices from professional analysis. Many successful entrepreneurs choose to focus on building sustainable businesses rather than pursuing publicity. She responded carefully. Strategic privacy can be a significant competitive advantage in crowded markets. Interesting perspective, Harvey commented. I've always believed that real achievement speaks for itself without requiring external validation or family approval. The pointed reference to family approval made Jessica's stomach clench, but she forced herself to continue the presentation, while other Davis and Polk partners observed the increasingly tense dynamics. She could see them exchanging meaningful looks and knew they were beginning to question whether she could handle such a high-profile client relationship, given the obvious personal complications. During a break for coffee and pastries, Jessica found herself cornered by Thomas Davis in the hallway outside the conference room. His expression combined concern for the client relationship with frustration about complications he hadn't anticipated when assigning her to this critical account. Jessica, I need to understand exactly what's happening here, Thomas said quietly. Harvey Morrison is clearly more than just another tech entrepreneur, and your personal connection to him is creating visible tension in what should be a straightforward business presentation. He's my fiancé's younger brother, Jessica admitted reluctantly. The family has always thought his business ventures were unsuccessful, but obviously, we were completely wrong about his actual achievements. Thomas's eyebrows rose as he processed the implications. You mean you've been personally involved in underestimating a CEO who's built a company worth enough to justify our largest client engagement this year? The blunt assessment of her error made Jessica wince, but she couldn't deny its accuracy. The family dynamic is complicated, but I can absolutely maintain professional objectivity in representing Secure Vault's interests. The question isn't whether you can be objective, Thomas replied sharply. The question is whether Harvey Morrison trusts you to be objective, and whether our other partners believe this relationship compromises the firm's credibility with such an important client. Back in the conference room, Jessica noticed that Harvey's assistant, Emily Rodriguez, had been taking notes throughout the meeting, presumably documenting everything for later review by Secure Vault's board. The realization that her performance was being evaluated not just by Harvey, but by his entire leadership team added another layer of pressure to an already impossible situation. As the meeting resumed, Jessica's phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Daniel, who was clearly growing impatient for updates about her big presentation to some nobody CEO. Each vibration felt like a small explosion, reminding everyone in the room of the family dynamics that had led to this awkward confrontation. Harvey noticed the constant interruptions, but said nothing, allowing the mounting tension to speak for itself. "Mr. Morrison," Jessica said during a lull in the technical discussion, "perhaps we should schedule a follow-up meeting to address any remaining questions about our services. This has been quite comprehensive, and I want to ensure you have time to consider all the information." "Actually," Harvey replied thoughtfully, "I'd like to invite my board of directors to evaluate Davis and Polk's proposal alongside presentations from 2 other firms. Secure Vault believes in thorough due diligence before making important decisions, especially regarding relationships that will significantly impact our future growth." The mention of competing presentations sent visible alarm through the Davis and Polk team, who had assumed their reputation and Jessica's preparation would secure the account without competition. Jessica realized that Harvey was deliberately introducing uncertainty into the process, possibly as punishment for her family's treatment of him, or as a legitimate business decision to explore all options. Of course, Thomas Davis responded quickly. "We welcome the opportunity to demonstrate why Davis and Polk is uniquely qualified to support Secure Vault's expansion plans." "Excellent," Harvey said with a smile that revealed nothing about his intentions. "Emily will coordinate with your team to schedule presentations for next week. I look forward to seeing how different firms approach the unique challenges facing rapidly growing financial technology companies." As the meeting concluded, Jessica watched Harvey shake hands with Thomas Davis and the other partners with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to commanding respect in professional settings. The contrast with her family's perception of him as a failed entrepreneur was so stark that she began questioning every assumption she had ever made about success, achievement, and social status. Harvey paused beside Jessica as the room emptied, his expression unreadable as he prepared to leave. "Please give my regards to Daniel and my parents," he said quietly. "I'm sure they'll be interested to hear about today's meeting." The words contained multiple layers of meaning that made Jessica's heart race with anxiety about how to explain this encounter to her fiancé and his family. Harvey was offering her the choice of how to frame the revelation, but both options seemed fraught with consequences she couldn't fully anticipate. As Harvey and his team left Davis and Polk's offices, Jessica remained in the empty conference room staring at her presentation materials, while contemplating how completely her understanding of the Morrison family hierarchy had been overturned in the span of 2 hours. Her phone showed 14 missed calls from Daniel and a voicemail from Harvey's mother, asking for details about her successful meeting with the computer person. The irony of the situation was so overwhelming that Jessica almost laughed out loud. She had spent months bragging to Harvey's family about her successful career and important clients, never knowing that she was about to meet the most successful entrepreneur any of them had ever encountered. Now her professional future depended entirely on the mercy of the man she had helped exclude from family celebrations because his life was supposedly an embarrassment. Jessica's hands shook as she dialed Daniel's number from her office 30 minutes after Harvey and his team had left Davis and Polk. The weight of what she had discovered, combined with the impossible task of explaining it to her fiancé, made her feel physically sick. Daniel answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and expectant. "How did the big meeting go? Mom's been texting me all morning asking for updates about your presentation to that tech CEO. She's so excited that you're bringing in such important business for the firm." Jessica closed her office door and sat heavily in her leather chair, trying to find words for a conversation that would shatter Daniel's understanding of his own family. "Daniel, we need to talk about something important. The CEO I met with today, it was Harvey." The silence stretched so long that Jessica wondered if the call had been dropped. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice carried a confusion that she recognized as the same disbelief she had felt in the conference room. "What do you mean it was Harvey? Harvey doesn't run a company. He's been struggling since his startup thing failed 2 years ago. You must be confused about the name." "No, Daniel, it was definitely your brother. Harvey Morrison is the CEO and founder of Secure Vault Financial, a company that's apparently worth hundreds of millions of dollars and is planning to go public within 18 months. The meeting I've been preparing for all month was with the brother your family has been treating like a failure." Jessica could hear Daniel moving around, probably pacing the way he did when processing stressful information. His breathing became more rapid as the implications began sinking in, and she braced herself for the explosion of emotions she knew was coming. "That's impossible. Harvey lives in some crappy apartment and drives an ancient Honda. He barely shows up to family dinners, and when he does, he never talks about work except to make vague comments about consulting projects. There's no way he's running a major company." "Daniel, I sat across from him in Davis and Polk's main conference room while he discussed his company's plans for an initial public offering. He had a CFO and an executive assistant with him, and he carried himself like someone who's been running high-stakes business meetings for years. This isn't some mistake or confusion. Your brother has been hiding his success from your family." The realization hit Daniel like a physical blow, and Jessica could hear him struggling to reconcile years of assumptions with this new reality. But why would he lie about something like that? Why would he let us think he was failing when he was actually building some huge company? "I don't think he lied exactly. I think he just never corrected your family's assumptions. And after a while, it became easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe rather than deal with the complications of the truth." Daniel's voice grew quieter, and Jessica recognized the tone he used when processing painful realizations. "Oh God, Jessica, the things we've said about him, the way we've treated him. That New Year's Eve text I sent? I told him not to come because I was embarrassed by his situation. It gets worse." Jessica continued, knowing she had to reveal the full scope of their error. "During the meeting, your mother called to congratulate me on landing such an important client. She spent 5 minutes telling me how proud she was, that I was bringing real success into the family, unlike Harvey's constant disappointments. Harvey heard every word because I had to take the call on speaker." The silence that followed was broken by what sounded like Daniel sitting down heavily, possibly on his couch or bed. Jessica could imagine him holding his head in his hands, processing the magnitude of how wrong his family had been about Harvey's life and achievements. "How successful is he exactly?" Daniel asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Successful enough that landing his company as a client could make my career at Davis and Polk. Successful enough that other major law firms are competing for his business. Successful enough that his CFO talks about regulatory compliance for their upcoming IPO like it's routine corporate planning." Daniel groaned audibly. "We have to tell Mom and Dad immediately. They need to know what we've done, how wrong we've been about everything. Daniel, there's something else you need to consider. Harvey now knows exactly how your family has talked about him behind his back. He heard your mother dismiss his achievements while praising mine. He knows about the New Year's Eve exclusion and all the casual insults over the years. The question isn't just how to apologize, it's whether he'll ever trust your family enough to want a relationship with any of us." The phone call continued for another 20 minutes as Daniel processed the implications for every family gathering, every dismissive comment, and every moment when they had treated Harvey's absence as evidence of his inadequacy, rather than a choice to avoid people who didn't value him. Jessica found herself in the strange position of defending Harvey's perspective, while simultaneously fearing for her own professional future. "I have to go see him," Daniel said finally. "I have to apologize in person and try to explain that we never meant to hurt him this badly." Daniel, don't do anything impulsive. Harvey was completely professional during the meeting, but I could tell he was processing a lot of emotions beneath the surface. Maybe give him some space to decide how he wants to handle this situation. But Jessica could hear in Daniel's voice that he had already made his decision. The guilt and realization were driving him toward immediate action, regardless of whether Harvey was prepared for such a confrontation. She ended the call with a growing sense of dread about how Daniel's emotional state might complicate an already impossible situation. Within an hour, Jessica's phone was buzzing with calls from Harvey's parents, Daniel's friends, and extended family members as word spread about the discovery. Each conversation forced her to relive the humiliation of the morning's revelation, while explaining to people who had never taken Harvey seriously that he was actually the most successful person in their social circle. Harvey's father called around 3 o'clock, his voice shaky, with the kind of emotion Jessica had never heard from him before. Jessica, Daniel told us about Harvey's company. Is it really true that he's been this successful while we've been worrying about his future? It's absolutely true, Mr. Morrison. Harvey has built something extraordinary while maintaining complete privacy about his achievements. I think he wanted to succeed on his own terms without dealing with family expectations or judgment. But why didn't he tell us? Why did he let us worry about him for so long? Jessica considered several diplomatic answers before settling on a truth that felt both honest and kind. Maybe he needed to prove something to himself before he proved it to anyone else. Or maybe he was protecting himself from having his success overshadowed by family dynamics that had always made him feel undervalued. The conversation lasted nearly an hour as Harvey's father processed years of missed signals and misunderstood priorities. Jessica found herself defending Harvey's choices while simultaneously dreading the family confrontation that was clearly building toward an inevitable explosion. At 4:30, Emily Rodriguez called Jessica's direct line at Davis and Polk, her tone professional, but carrying an undertone of concern that made Jessica's stomach drop. Ms. Martinez, I'm calling to inform you that someone claiming to be Mr. Morrison's brother has arrived at Secure Vault's offices demanding to see him. Building security is currently detaining this individual in the lobby, while they await instructions from Mr. Morrison about how to proceed. Jessica closed her eyes, knowing that Daniel's emotional decision to confront Harvey immediately had just created the exact type of public scene that could damage both Harvey's professional reputation and Secure Vault's corporate image. The situation was spiraling beyond anyone's control, and she was powerless to stop the collision of family drama with Harvey's carefully constructed business world. Is Mr. Morrison available to speak with his brother? Jessica asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Mr. Morrison is in a board meeting discussing today's presentation with Davis and Polk, among other legal options. He's asked that I document this incident and coordinate with building security to ensure that Secure Vault's offices remain a professional environment free from personal disruptions. The formal language made it clear that Harvey was treating Daniel's appearance as a security concern rather than a family matter, probably protecting himself from the emotional manipulation that had characterized their relationship for years. Jessica realized that Daniel's impulsive decision to demand immediate forgiveness might have permanently damaged any possibility of rebuilding their brotherhood. Please tell Mr. Morrison that I apologize for any disruption this has caused to Secure Vault's business operations, Jessica said carefully. And please assure him that Davis and Polk remains committed to maintaining appropriate professional boundaries, regardless of any personal complications. As Jessica ended the call, she realized that her professional future, her engagement to Daniel, and the entire Morrison family dynamic were all hanging in the balance, dependent on decisions being made by the man they had spent years dismissing as a failure. The irony was so complete that it felt like divine justice, and Jessica wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at how perfectly the universe had orchestrated their comeuppance. Daniel's confrontation with Secure Vault's security team was being live-streamed by a bystander within 10 minutes, turning his emotional breakdown into viral social media content that would define the Morrison family's public humiliation for weeks to come. Jessica watched the video from her office with growing horror as Daniel screamed about family loyalty and blood being thicker than water, while 3 security guards calmly escorted him from the building's marble lobby. "All right, that's my brother up there," Daniel shouted, pointing toward Secure Vault's executive floors while his voice echoed through the downtown office building's atrium. "Harvey Morrison owes me a conversation. We're family, and family doesn't hide behind corporate security when there are problems to discuss." The livestream's comments section exploded with speculation about the identity of the angry man being removed from what viewers could clearly see was an upscale corporate environment. Within hours, internet detectives had identified Daniel Morrison and connected him to both Jessica and Harvey, creating a viral narrative about entitled family members disrupting a successful CEO's workplace. Emily Rodriguez called Jessica again at 6 o'clock with an update that made the situation exponentially worse. "Ms. Martinez, I thought you should know that the incident with Mr. Morrison's brother has been picked up by several business news outlets. Chicago Business Today is running a story about family members attempting to exploit successful entrepreneurs for personal gain." Jessica's heart sank as she realized that Harvey's professional reputation was being damaged by association with Daniel's public breakdown, regardless of Harvey's complete professionalism in handling the situation. The business community would inevitably wonder what kind of family drama might affect Secure Vault's leadership stability, potentially complicating their upcoming IPO process. "Has Mr. Morrison made any statements about the incident?" Jessica asked, dreading the answer. "Mr. Morrison released a brief statement through our communications team emphasizing that Secure Vault maintains strict boundaries between personal relationships and business operations. He expressed regret that family members chose to create public disruptions rather than addressing private matters through appropriate channels." The diplomatic language was devastating in its restraint, making Daniel's outburst look even more inappropriate by comparison. Harvey was positioning himself as the reasonable party while allowing Daniel's own actions to demonstrate the wisdom of maintaining distance from family members who couldn't respect professional boundaries. By 7 o'clock, both Harvey's parents had arrived at Secure Vault's building, creating a second wave of social media attention as building security prevented them from accessing the executive floors. Jessica received a frantic call from Harvey's mother, whose voice combined desperation with the dawning realization that her son's success meant her family's behavior was being evaluated by an entirely different set of standards. "Jessica, can you please call Harvey and ask him to see us? We just want to apologize and explain that we never meant to hurt him. We had no idea he was this successful, and if we had known, everything would have been different." The conditional nature of the apology revealed exactly why Harvey had chosen to keep his success private, and Jessica found herself in the impossible position of defending decisions she was only beginning to understand herself. "Mrs. Morrison, I think Harvey's main concern is that his family's support seems dependent on his financial success, rather than unconditional love and respect. But we've always loved Harvey. We just wanted him to be practical about his career choices instead of chasing unrealistic dreams." "Except his dreams weren't unrealistic," Jessica replied gently. "He achieved everything he set out to accomplish, but your family's support was contingent on him achieving it in ways that met your approval rather than his own vision." The conversation highlighted the fundamental disconnect between Harvey's family's intentions and their actual impact on his emotional development. They had genuinely believed they were protecting him from disappointment, never recognizing that their protection felt like dismissal, and their concern appeared as lack of confidence in his abilities. Meanwhile, Thomas Davis called Jessica with news that made her professional situation even more precarious. "Jessica, I've been contacted by Secure Vault's board of directors about expediting their legal representation decision. Apparently, today's family drama has convinced them that they need legal counsel capable of managing complex personal and professional boundary issues." "What does that mean for my involvement in their account?" Jessica asked, though she suspected the answer would be devastating. It means that Harvey Morrison has specifically requested that Davis and Polk assign different legal representation for Secure Vault's needs. He cited concerns about potential conflicts of interest and the firm's ability to maintain appropriate professional distance given the personal relationships involved. Jessica felt her career prospects crumbling as she processed the implications of losing the biggest account she had ever secured. More than the professional setback, however, she was struck by the poetic justice of Harvey's decision to protect his business interests by excluding family members who had demonstrated poor judgment about personal and professional boundaries. However, Thomas continued, Mr. Morrison also specifically requested that you continue handling his company's smaller legal matters, particularly those involving intellectual property protection and regulatory compliance research. He apparently values your legal expertise despite the personal complications. The nuanced decision revealed Harvey's sophisticated understanding of how to separate business merit from personal relationships while still holding people accountable for their choices. He was offering Jessica professional opportunities proportional to her demonstrated competence, while protecting his company's most critical legal needs from potential complications. That evening, Chicago Business Today published a comprehensive article about Secure Vault Financial's rise to prominence, featuring Harvey's photograph and a detailed analysis of his company's innovative blockchain security protocols. The article mentioned the family disturbance at Secure Vault's offices, but focused primarily on Harvey's impressive track record of building sustainable technology businesses without seeking publicity or venture capital attention. Harvey Morrison represents a new generation of Chicago entrepreneurs who prioritize substance over flash, the article concluded. While other tech executives court media attention and social media followers, Morrison has quietly built one of the Midwest's most promising financial technology companies by focusing exclusively on product development and client satisfaction. The business community's response was overwhelmingly positive, with several venture capital firms expressing interest in Secure Vault's upcoming public offering, despite Harvey's preference for organic growth over external investment. Industry analysts praised his strategic decision to maintain privacy during the company's development phase, noting that many successful entrepreneurs deliberately avoid premature publicity that can distract from core business development. Jessica read the article from her apartment while fielding angry calls from Daniel, who blamed her for not adequately preparing him for Harvey's success and accused her of prioritizing her career over their relationship. The accusations stung because they contained enough truth to be painful. But Jessica was beginning to understand that her relationship with Daniel had been built on shared assumptions about success and social status that Harvey's revelation had completely undermined. You should have figured out who Harvey really was before today, Daniel argued during their most heated phone conversation. If you had done better research about the client, we could have approached this situation completely differently. Daniel, your brother, deliberately maintained privacy about his achievements. The fact that I couldn't research his success isn't the real problem here. The real problem is that your family's love and respect has always been conditional on meeting your definitions of acceptable achievement. The argument continued until Daniel hung up in frustration, leaving Jessica to contemplate whether their relationship could survive the revelation that her professional success now depended on the mercy of the family member they had treated as a disappointment. The irony was so complete that it felt like a morality tale, designed to teach lessons about humility, respect, and the dangers of judging people based on superficial indicators of success. As she prepared for bed, Jessica realized that Harvey had achieved something far more impressive than financial success he had built, a life and career that were completely insulated from his family's approval or disapproval, while still maintaining enough integrity to offer professional opportunities to people who had personally wronged him. His response to their mistreatment revealed the kind of character that probably contributed more to his business success than any technical skills or entrepreneurial instincts. The next morning would bring new complications as the Morrison family attempted to rebuild relationships that Harvey might not be interested in salvaging. But Jessica was beginning to understand that the real lesson wasn't about forgiveness or family loyalty. It was about the importance of treating people with respect and kindness, regardless of their apparent social status, because you never know who might be in a position to affect your future in ways you can't anticipate. 6 months after the boardroom revelation that shattered the Morrison family's understanding of success and respect, Harvey stood in his corner office overlooking Lake Michigan, reviewing Secure Vault Financial's initial public offering documents while reflecting on the profound changes that had transformed every relationship in his life. The company's stock price had opened at $42 per share and climbed to $68, by closing bell making Harvey worth approximately $400 million on paper, and validating years of strategic decisions that his family had dismissed as unrealistic dreams. The IPO's success had attracted attention from major financial publications, leading to Harvey's first public interviews and a feature story in Forbes magazine titled "The Invisible Entrepreneur: How Harvey Morrison Built a Fintech Empire While Flying Under the Radar." The article praised his unconventional approach to business development and noted that Secure Vault's employee satisfaction ratings ranked among the highest in Chicago's technology sector. Evidence of leadership principles that prioritized substance over spectacle. Jessica's professional trajectory had taken an unexpected turn following her removal from Secure Vault's primary legal account. Initially devastated by losing the biggest client opportunity of her career, she had gradually recognized that Harvey's decision to maintain professional boundaries while still offering her smaller projects had taught her valuable lessons about integrity and merit-based relationships. Her work on Secure Vault's intellectual property portfolio had been exemplary, leading Thomas Davis to assign her to other technology clients who appreciated her thorough preparation and attention to detail. "I learned more about professional ethics from losing Harvey's account than I had from winning it," Jessica admitted during a coffee meeting with Harvey 3 months after the initial confrontation. "Watching how you separated personal feelings from business decisions made me realize how much my own judgment had been compromised by assumptions about social status and family dynamics." Harvey had agreed to the meeting partly from curiosity about Jessica's growth, and partly from a desire to understand whether her relationship with Daniel could survive the revelation of how wrong they had all been about his life and achievements. The conversation took place at a neutral downtown coffee shop away from both Secure Vault's offices and any family-associated locations where their discussion might be complicated by emotional history. "The hardest part of building Secure Vault wasn't the technical challenges or financial obstacles," Harvey explained. "It was learning to value my own opinion of my work more than my family's approval or disapproval. Once I stopped needing their validation, I could focus entirely on building something meaningful, rather than trying to prove anything to people who had already decided what I was capable of achieving." Jessica nodded, recognizing parallels to her own recent experiences with professional setbacks and personal growth. "Daniel struggled with that realization for months. He couldn't understand why you had chosen to succeed without including your family in the victory. And it took him a long time to recognize that your exclusion from family celebrations had made inclusion in your success seem hypocritical." Harvey's relationship with his brother had evolved slowly and carefully, beginning with Daniel's written apology letter that acknowledged specific instances of dismissive treatment and expressed genuine remorse for participating in Harvey's exclusion from family gatherings. Unlike his parents' conditional apologies that focused on their ignorance of his success, Daniel's letter addressed the fundamental disrespect he had shown regardless of Harvey's financial achievements. "I realized that I had been treating you like a problem to be solved rather than a brother to be supported," Daniel wrote in the letter that had initiated their reconciliation process. "Your success doesn't change the fact that I failed to believe in you when belief was what you needed from family. And I understand if that failure damaged our relationship permanently. The sincerity of Daniel's accountability had surprised Harvey, who had expected either defensive justifications or attempts to minimize the impact of years of casual dismissal. Instead, Daniel had demonstrated genuine understanding of how his behavior had affected Harvey's willingness to share personal and professional milestones with family members, who seemed more interested in being right about his limitations than in celebrating his achievements. Their parents' journey toward understanding had been more complicated, involving family therapy sessions that revealed decades of favoritism and unconscious bias that had shaped both brothers' development in different but equally damaging ways. Harvey's mother struggled to understand why her genuine concern about his financial stability had felt like lack of confidence in his abilities, while his father grappled with recognizing how his pride in Daniel's conventional success had inadvertently communicated disappointment in Harvey's unconventional path. "We thought we were protecting you from unrealistic expectations," his mother explained during one particularly emotional therapy session. "We had seen so many young people struggle with entrepreneurial dreams that never materialized, and we wanted to spare you that disappointment. But your protection felt like prediction that I would fail," Harvey responded. "Instead of supporting my vision while encouraging practical backup plans, you dismissed my vision entirely and focused only on the backup plans. That made me feel like you believed failure was inevitable, rather than possible, but manageable." The distinction between supporting someone's dreams while encouraging practical planning versus dismissing their dreams while insisting on practical alternatives had become a central theme in the family's therapy work. Harvey's success had proven that his entrepreneurial instincts were sound, but more importantly, it had revealed that family support should be based on love and respect for the person, rather than approval of their choices or confidence in their likely outcomes. Marcus Chen, Harvey's CFO and closest business partner, had observed the family reconciliation process with interest and concern for how personal distractions might affect Harvey's leadership effectiveness during Secure Vault's critical growth phase. However, he had been impressed by Harvey's ability to maintain clear boundaries between family therapy and business responsibilities, while still engaging authentically with the emotional work required for genuine reconciliation. Watching Harvey navigate family relationships during our IPO process actually increased my confidence in his leadership abilities. Marcus explained to Emily Rodriguez during one of their regular check-ins about company culture and employee satisfaction. "Someone who can maintain professional standards while dealing with complex personal situations under public scrutiny demonstrates exactly the kind of emotional intelligence and strategic thinking that makes great CEOs." Secure Vault's employee retention rates during the IPO period had exceeded industry standards, partly because Harvey's leadership style emphasized team stability and long-term vision rather than short-term financial metrics. The company's success had created opportunities for significant wealth building among early employees, but Harvey had structured equity distributions to reward loyalty and contribution, rather than simply seniority or negotiating ability. Harvey taught me that real leadership means creating value for everyone who contributes to success, rather than concentrating wealth among people who happen to be in the right place at the right time, explained Sarah Mitchell, Secure Vault's head of product development, who had joined the company when it employed fewer than 20 people and now managed a team of 40 software engineers. The company's growth had attracted acquisition offers from major financial institutions, but Harvey had consistently declined opportunities that would have compromised Secure Vault's independence or cultural values. His decision to pursue public ownership rather than private sale reflected lessons learned from his family experiences about the importance of maintaining control over relationships and decisions that affect long-term well-being. "Independence doesn't mean isolation," Harvey explained during his Forbes magazine interview. It means having the freedom to choose your relationships and commitments based on mutual respect and shared values rather than external pressure or financial convenience. Building a company is like building a family. The quality of the relationships matters more than the size of the bank account. The interview had been Harvey's first extensive public discussion of the personal philosophy that had guided Secure Vault's development, and the response from both business leaders and entrepreneurship students had been overwhelmingly positive. Several universities had invited him to speak about balancing personal integrity with professional ambition topics that resonated with young people facing similar tensions between family expectations and individual vision. Jessica's engagement to Daniel had ended by mutual agreement 6 months after the boardroom revelation, though their breakup was amicable and based on recognition that their relationship had been built on shared assumptions about success and social status that no longer felt authentic to either of them. Both had grown during the process of understanding Harvey's perspective, but their growth had led them toward different conclusions about what they wanted from romantic partnerships. I realized that I was more attracted to Daniel's family's approval than to Daniel himself. Jessica admitted during her final conversation with Harvey about the situation. Once I understood that your family's opinion of me was based on their misunderstanding of what constitutes real achievement, I had to question whether my own values were as superficial as theirs had been. Daniel's own reflection had led him toward a career change from corporate consulting to nonprofit management, where he found more personal satisfaction in mission-driven work that emphasized social impact over financial returns. His decision surprised his parents, who worried that he was abandoning practical career advancement for idealistic pursuits. But Harvey supported his brother's choice to prioritize personal fulfillment over external measures of professional success. Daniel is doing what I did when I left my first startup to pursue Secure Vault. Harvey explained to their parents during a family dinner that felt more authentic than any meal they had shared in years. He's choosing to build something meaningful rather than something that meets other people's definitions of impressive. The family dinners themselves had evolved significantly, with conversations focusing on personal growth, creative projects, and meaningful experiences, rather than career achievements and financial milestones. Harvey's parents had gradually learned to ask about his work in terms of satisfaction and challenge rather than profit and recognition, while Daniel shared stories from his nonprofit projects that emphasized personal fulfillment over professional advancement. We talk about what makes us proud of our work rather than what makes other people impressed by our work. Harvey's mother observed during a conversation with Jessica, whom she had maintained a relationship with despite the ended engagement. I never realized how much of our family conversation was focused on external validation rather than internal satisfaction. Harvey's romantic life had also evolved during Secure Vault's growth period, though he had deliberately kept personal relationships separate from both family dynamics and business operations. His relationship with Dr. Amanda Foster, a clinical psychologist who specialized in entrepreneurial mental health, had developed slowly and carefully based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than family approval or professional networking. Amanda understands that my family relationships are complicated without needing to fix them or judge them, Harvey explained to Marcus during one of their regular lunches. She supports my decisions about boundaries and reconciliation without having any agenda about how those relationships should look or develop. The relationship had provided Harvey with emotional stability during the stressful period of preparing for Secure Vault's public offering, while navigating family therapy and media attention. Amanda's professional background in entrepreneurial psychology had given her unique insight into the pressures Harvey faced, while her personal detachment from his family drama had allowed her to offer objective perspective without emotional investment in particular outcomes. As Harvey prepared to close his laptop and head home to Amanda's apartment for dinner, he reflected on the profound ways that standing up for himself had improved every aspect of his life. Setting boundaries with family members who had dismissed his achievements had created space for authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. Building a successful company without seeking family validation had taught him to trust his own judgment and value his own opinion of his work. The most surprising outcome of the entire experience had been discovering that his family was capable of growth and change when confronted with evidence that their assumptions had been wrong. While their initial reactions had been defensive and self-serving, the therapy process had helped them recognize patterns of favoritism and dismissal that they had never consciously acknowledged. Harvey's success had forced them to examine their own values and priorities in ways that ultimately strengthened their relationships with each other, as well as with him. I learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or pretending that harmful behavior didn't happen, Harvey said during his final interview with Chicago Business Today. Real forgiveness involves acknowledging what went wrong, taking responsibility for your part in dysfunctional patterns, and committing to different behavior going forward. My family did that work, which made reconciliation possible, but the work was more important than the reconciliation itself. The interview had been part of a series about Chicago entrepreneurs who had built successful companies while managing complex personal challenges, and Harvey's story had resonated with readers who faced similar tensions between individual ambition and family expectations. Several young entrepreneurs had contacted SecureVault's offices asking for mentorship or advice about navigating family disapproval of unconventional career choices. The most important lesson I can share is that your family's opinion of your choices doesn't determine your likelihood of success, Harvey had told a group of entrepreneurship students at Northwestern University. Their support certainly makes the journey easier and more enjoyable, but their disapproval doesn't make your vision any less valid or achievable. Sometimes the best gift you can give your family is proving them wrong about your limitations. The speech had received a standing ovation and generated multiple requests for Harvey to speak at other universities and entrepreneurship conferences, though he had declined most opportunities in order to focus on SecureVault's continued growth and his personal relationships. Fame and recognition had never been his primary motivations, and success had reinforced his preference for meaningful work over public attention. As Harvey walked through downtown Chicago toward Amanda's apartment, he thought about the family dinner planned for the following weekend, where he would announce SecureVault's decision to establish a Chicago-based foundation focused on supporting young entrepreneurs from families that couldn't provide financial backing for innovative business ideas. The foundation would offer both funding and mentorship for people whose families doubted their entrepreneurial potential, creating opportunities for the kind of success Harvey had achieved despite, rather than because of family support. Sometimes the people who love us most are the least capable of believing in our biggest dreams, Harvey reflected during his final therapy session with his family. That doesn't make them bad people or mean that we should cut them out of our lives. It just means that we need to find other sources of encouragement and validation while we prove that love and belief are different things that don't always come from the same people. The therapy work had helped Harvey understand that his family's lack of confidence in his entrepreneurial abilities had reflected their own fears and limitations, rather than realistic assessments of his potential. Their concern about his financial security had been genuine, but their inability to imagine success outside conventional career paths had been more about their own anxiety than his actual capabilities. Understanding the difference had allowed Harvey to forgive their lack of vision, while still maintaining boundaries about how much influence their opinions would have on his future decisions. I spent years trying to earn respect I already deserved, Harvey concluded during his conversation with Jessica at their final coffee meeting. The moment I stopped seeking approval and started building something meaningful, regardless of whether my family understood it, everything changed. Success isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. But sometimes proving yourself right does require ignoring people who are committed to believing you're wrong. As Harvey reached Amanda's apartment building, his phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. "Proud of you, little brother. See you Sunday for dinner." The simple message represented years of growth and reconciliation. But more importantly, it reflected the kind of relationship Harvey had always wanted with his family, one based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than conditional approval and external validation. Harvey smiled as he entered the building, grateful for the journey that had led him to understand the difference between earning respect and demanding it, between seeking approval and building self-confidence, and between family loyalty and family dysfunction. SecureVault's success had provided financial security and professional recognition, but the real achievement was learning to value himself enough to set boundaries with people he loved when their behavior threatened his emotional well-being and personal growth. The story of Harvey Morrison and SecureVault Financial had become a case study in entrepreneurial resilience and family dynamics. But for Harvey himself, it was simply the foundation for a life built on authentic relationships, meaningful work, and the quiet satisfaction of proving that success is possible for anyone willing to trust their vision and do the work necessary to make it reality. What challenges have you faced when family members didn't believe in your dreams or goals? How did you handle situations where the people closest to you couldn't see your potential? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about overcoming doubt and building confidence despite lack of support from people who matter to you. If this story resonated with your own experiences with family dynamics and personal success, please like this video and share it with anyone who might benefit from Harvey's journey. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about people who turned their biggest challenges into their greatest triumphs. Thank you for listening to Harvey's story, and I wish you the courage to believe in yourself even when others can't see what you're capable of achieving.